Okay, so here's our first video in our 504 accommodation plan. Depends on if you're doing a continuation, which in most cases, if a student already has a 504, you're going to click on this area here. If it is an initial 504, of which you've acquired the right information from the parents as far as doctor's visits, the psychologist, you've checked in with them, you're going to mark for an initial here. So that those portions are pretty self-explanatory. For the most part, you're probably going to run into continuation of the 504. You want to get today's date, 3-year evaluation, depends where they are and how long they've had a 504. Evaluation due date, always want to get the student name, student number, date of birth, all the demographics here. You can have that filled in prior to the meeting by pulling that information from Aries and then double checking with guardians to see if anything has changed as far as address and phone numbers. The nurse information here, this is of course from Madera South, so I have the nurse's name filled in, psychologist, you will be the coordinator. Typically what we would do prior to our meetings is send out a strengths and weaknesses feedback form from our teachers. So I'll see if we have that here on our site to obtain that feedback as well. So this will basically give us the strengths of the student. This will give us existing concerns observed in the classroom. So all this is being conducted at the start of the meeting. The disability, if it has been documented at this point, you want to type that in here. You click on that and type it in. Disability documentation, this is if they brought in a note or something to that effect, you can make that documentation there. Describe how the disability limits major life activity, so on and so forth. Then going down to this section, list of specific areas of weakness and achievement. So what specific areas might the student be struggling with? You also want to know, is the student exiting special education, which in most cases they're not, so you'll mark no. And is the student currently on an IEP? In most cases, if they're on an IEP, you will not need a 504, so you can mark no. Check with the nurse for vision, hearing, all that information is filled out here. Now, typically during the presentation, there's talking points where you're going to be taking notes as far as receiving feedback. I've created a template here, receiving feedback from the parties involved. So this template, you just fill in the name of the student, the date, the time, the members. You can continue to add people here. Parents' rights are very important, so you want to cover that after the demographics section of the 504 process. So the parents' rights covers all that information. That's an added packet that I can give to you. I take note of the parent input here, any teacher input, the nurse input, psychologist input, even possibly student input if you like to add that. Document the disability, has a history of, for example, ADHD. And then there's accommodations, which are the same that you see on the other page here. So this is where you list out preferred seating, must take medicine before 10 a.m. All that good stuff goes there. And then sometimes there's accommodations for home that are discussed and agreed upon by the student and parents. These are some examples to comply with medical recommendations, which is always a need. And if there's any change in the health status, it's important that they report these. Counselor report can give you feedback. This portion we will not need for middle school. And then you conclude the notes here and the time that you've ended. And then that information can be transferred over to here. Accommodations for school, accommodations for home. Casey does not pertain to us. This transition does not pertain to us. But then you want to make sure that when you get to this section that we look at the student's disability and make sure that we see that it would not cause him or her to violate school rules. Therefore, the student will be accountable for school rules. So we want to check that if that's fitting. In most cases, it is. The student's disability will not impair their ability to make good decisions. So at the end of the meeting, you want to have all people who are present to sign. This is a parent initial in regards to the parent's rights that were covered at the start of the meeting. And that's pretty much it. You conclude your meeting. The meeting probably takes you approximately 45 minutes to an hour from my experience. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.